A proposal being put to the federal government suggests locking away some of a person's superannuation to fund their own future aged care. It's one of a series of ideas proposed by industry stakeholders at a summit in June. Following reports, the country's aged care budget is expected to balloon to $40 billion by the year 2026. The paper argues higher taxes and greater consumer contributions will be needed to ensure services can be maintained into the next decade. National Senator Matt Canavan, we spoke about this last hour. He agrees more funding is needed for aged care, but other avenues should be assessed first.
I don't think this is a good idea because for most Australians their superannuation might not be enough as it is. So I don't think there's this sort of pot of gold there to raid to fund the aged care deficit we're facing.
Okay, so let's bring in the Deputy Opposition Leader, Susan Lee, on this now. Susan, we'll start here this morning. Good to see you, by the way. So would you support a levy or a plan to kind of ring-fence someone's own super to pay for their aged care?
Well, like Matt Canavan, I am concerned if that's where the government is heading. But stepping back, Pete, we do want to see a sustainable aged care system, and we have indicated that we will work with the government towards that. If anyone has a relative in aged care, my mum's there, I'm there every single weekend, they know that it's really, really important that we deliver the best possible care for our older Australians, and there's a way to go. What worries me too is that we've got a minister in charge of this area who is incompetent, promised to deliver 24/7 nurses and didn't, absolutely has done nothing to rescue the Commonwealth Games, failed to rule out new taxes for aged care in her press club speech a few months ago. And again, Labor's instinct will, of course, be always to reach for new tax to fix a problem. So Let's see what comes out of the task force, and once more, willing to work constructively.
Well, I mean, like you pointed out, you know, a lot of us have folks in aged care. Well, I mean, eventually we're all going to need it. So would you support a levy at all?
I'm not going to dive into what possible future options might be. I think it's important that the Minister's task force do its work.
Okay, but as for super, are you of the view that Matt Canavan said, you know, people don't have enough as it is?
Look, everyone's superannuation is different. This government has played with people's superannuation and produced poor policy outcomes generally. So this government has contributed to a lack of trust in superannuation. This isn't about superannuation, it's about aged care. It's about policy settings that actually put aged care on a long-term sustainable footing. Because as you say, Pete, more and more of us are going to need it. And not everyone can be cared for in their own home. So we have to have a residential aged care sector that is exemplary. And I've always said we want to lead the world in this area. We should be able to do the best possible, give the best possible care in the best possible way for our older Australians who've contributed so much to this country.
Just quickly before we get onto the voice, one more point here. I mean, Matt also said if you have an aged care levy, then you got to have an NDIS levy, then you got a defence levy. You know, where does it end? Do you have that concern as well?
Well, this government reaches for new taxes, levies. Something that's quick and easy and solves the problem is not the answer here. So the minister hasn't ruled out new taxes. New taxes are not necessarily the answer at all. But what we do need to see is real attention to policy detail and a commitment to getting it right, rather than just reaching for the grab bag that says number one on the top of the list is let's raise taxes, let's introduce a levy. That's not necessarily the answer at all.
Okay, the Prime Minister is tying himself in knots over treaty at the moment and whether he supports a Commonwealth push. He said, you know, some states are already underway in pursuing their own versions of it. What are your thoughts on his avoiding that question? And Linda Burney, for that matter, too.
Well, he has committed to implementing the Uluru Statement in full, which is voice, treaty, truth. He's committed to doing that in this term of Parliament. He was wriggling around yesterday, both on radio and in the Parliament, trying to draw some distinction between state government treaties, Commonwealth treaties, nothing to do right now, maybe something in the next term of Parliament. Meanwhile, we had the Indigenous Australians Minister unable to even explain what a Makarrata is or is meant to be or will look like or how much it will cost. Now, there's $5.8 million allocated to the Makarrata. $900,000 in setting up the commission has already been spent. We asked a simple question yesterday: what's that money being spent on? What will the Makarrata do once it's there? This is taxpayers' money, and we didn't even get an answer that included the word Makarrata on Monday, and we certainly aren't much closer to that today. So I don't think the Minister for Indigenous Australians is up to the task, and I can tell you, Pete, that if you're someone who passionately supports the Yes case, you're really disappointed in this government right now, because you're not seeing them explain, argue, not seeing the courage of their convictions. You're just seeing them avoiding the question.
Is Peter Dutton missing an opportunity by not going to Garma this weekend?
Indigenous policy is about much more than the Garma Festival. The Garma Festival is significant, and many politicians have attended it over many years. I was pretty disappointed to see Anthony Albanese politicise the Garma Festival and make this question about one day in the calendar, important though that day may be. There are hard yards to do in getting it right, in getting the outcomes that we all want to see for Indigenous Australians wherever they are in this country, in all of the circumstances of their lives. And if the Prime Minister and his ministers can't even answer basic questions about what the voice will look like, about what the Makarrata will do, about how much this will cost. I mean, this is what happens, Pete, when you try to alter the Constitution, our founding document, just on a vibe.
Okay, I know you've got to get to a meeting, Susan, so I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon.